Hello and welcome to the Barcast. I'm your host, Nick Barr, coming to you on a Saturday morning. And we're carrying on with the two today with the sexual two, whose keyword is conquista or conquest. In Spanish, it has a little bit of that association with the conquistador, the conqueror of territory. But that's really more in the realm of the social two, whose keyword is ambition. And we just read that chapter about sort of the land grabbing territorial quality of the social two. Here we're going to be moving into more of that one-on-one seduction quality. And I always caution with the sexual types, it's not really sexual per se, that's just one-on-one intensity is what's meant by sexual. But with the sexual two, I think it's okay to bring in more literally sexual connotations, as we will see. So this is Naranjo in his introduction. The sexual two is the quintessential type two. As if we say this character is a seducer, we can also add that the sexual two is the most visibly seductive of all. In American Enneagram culture, it's more common to say that the two is a helper, owing to my, Naranjo's, characterization of type two in the 70s as a Jewish mother. But this has the drawback of lacking discernment regarding the difference between a truly helpful character and one that seeks affection and recognition through kindness. These are people who might say, "I'll do anything for you," but when the opportunity arises to take them up on such an offer, it becomes evident that they are inconsistent with their offers of help. For this reason, it seems more accurate to say that the central theme is seduction. That is an expression of affection intended to elicit interest, loyalty, affection, protection, etc. from others, and only apparently help. The term vamp reveals a lot, as does the expression femme fatale. Both refer to a beautiful person, but of a dangerous beauty, one who needs to have you in their grasp and might end up devouring you. The sexual two's need to seduce implies a need for the other's desire. You'll hear the need to be needed. But to say that this desire is merely sexual would only see the most apparent layer. When exploring the issue and asking such people what they truly want, one might hear more original responses, such as, "I want everything." Just as we think of Helen of Troy as the archetype of a woman for whom wars are fought, and for whom men are willing to lose their lives, we can say that sexual twos aspire to an irresistibility capable of inspiring the great passions. However, most of these people are not honest enough to admit, quote, "What I truly want in a man is a pocket-sized Samson," or, quote, "I want a giant who will give me everything I want when I want it." It's understandable that some may think that inspiring great passion could solve everything in life, and that sexuality might entail money, castles, and essentially blank checks. This is how the sexual two thinks. And this is the Transformation of the Sexual Two by Consuelo Trujillo. She says, by means of introduction, "This work is inspired by the written testimonies and transcriptions of meetings we held over 3 years, continuously though regularly, as a group of individuals with a sexual two subtype." She mentions the people whose accounts she's capturing here. And then she says, "I heard Claudio say more than once, many twos will never arrive at a spiritual path or therapy except through a relationship crisis. Why would someone so wonderful question themselves unless external support or confirmation fails them?" This reflection has been a guiding inspiration for this work, for my process, and for the process of many others. The path to healing for a sexual two involves a descent, but this descent has many layers, as pride and seduction can easily disguise themselves, masking themselves with good intentions. The justification of love is dangerous. Sexual two can justify many acts, words, madness, destruction, and egocentrism in the name of love. It is as if love were the only emotion, the center of life, the experience that justifies everything. I just want to pause to reflect that justification piece. I remember in one of my introductions to the Enneagram, in the feeling triad, right? Feeling and truth are of central concern for the feeling triad, and so For the three's disconnected from feeling and disconnected from truth. But that disconnection is of central importance. The 4 says, I feel it, therefore it's true. So the 4 centers the primacy of their feelings almost as self-justification. The feelings are true. The feelings, I feel it, therefore it's true. The 2 is a justifier. It's true, therefore I feel this way. And so the justification piece, I think, is really important to capture early, as Trujillo has done. This person has created an image of themselves as someone desirable, lovable, affectionate, warm, a good companion, a person who occupies the hearts of others. Thus, they justify all their actions as being in pursuit of love. But this love becomes confused with pleasing, enchanting, seducing, attracting, and always occupying that special place by their own perceived right. One testimony says, I believe that at the beginning, 2s do not love. We love ourselves and we love love, that strong, intense, deep feeling where one is the protagonist and deeply desired. We love the magic of infatuation. We do not see the other. It's not love, it's self-idolization. This person cannot be questioned. This person cannot be touched because they are in a very high place on the side of love. Therefore, they are unquestionable. They will only emerge from their enchantment, their idolization, and their idealized self-image when their beloved abandons them, when they experience romantic failure, the breakdown of the relationship, or the abandonment by their child, the fall. She continues, losing love, the fall helps me. However, this person often avoids experiencing abandonment or romantic failure by abandoning first, before they can be abandoned. Thus, the first step toward healing is to not abandon, to be vulnerable to abandonment, to stay. The next step is to feel the abandonment, to listen to its causes, to hear that they are not the wonderful lover they believe themselves to be, that they are not the only one. To fall from their pedestal, to feel the pain, to place themselves among those who suffer, those who are not chosen. Quote from a testimony, abandonment, being abandoned. How is it possible that I, the ideal lover, am left? That is how a great tower of my pride collapsed. My neurotic passion kept me away from love. Another testimony adds, I became proud to avoid losing love. Life stripped me of that sense of superiority that pride helped me create. Falling was important, and the falls were always related to experiences of abandonment. Someone who values themselves so highly as a lover benefits from losing love, that cherished gift for which they fought so hard and invested so much energy. Only through this can they perceive the gaps, the falsehood, the shadow, the collapse of their idealized image, and finally see themselves. To endure another person's destruction of your idealized image as a spouse, lover, or companion, to fall into that void, that unknown space of responsibility, loss, and the realization that I too am that, to fall until the image crumbles, to experience solitude, fear, and failure. The experience of losing love can also be liberating. It allows one to stop playing the role of the ideal lover, to let go of that image of overabundance, that representation in which one is always attentive to perceiving the other's needs, always striving to earn love, to release the belief that, to be loved, one must do, one must be special, must be unique. Here's a testimony that illustrates this clearly. Feeling loved for who I am, just as I am, has been one of the most healing experiences. 2 examples of this. With my parents, when I told them I was marrying X, a person of my same sex, it was the first time I could stand before them with my whole truth without needing to do anything to be loved by them. That night, my mother came to wish me sweet dreams, hugged me, and gave me her blessing. I felt that something that had been separated was now united forever. A strong warmth filled my heart, and I slept as deeply as when I was a child. Feeling my parents' love and acceptance of all that I was launched me into life with new strength and love for myself. Another account, after a regression exercise during SAT 3, Seekers After Truth, the Naranjo program, I was lying on the floor like a rag, drained of life, unable to move. I had the sensation of being a fallen angel, of dying. At that moment, I saw Claudio as a great patriarch who descended to me, dying in my own hell. He lifted me up and said, I love you as you are, for yourself. My heart opened. If the Master loved me like that, stripped of all seduction, beauty, power, or intelligence, if he loved me when I was a creature devoid of everything, even the primary impulse of life, what more proof of God's love could I expect to feel worthy of it, to bow before it, and to recognize myself as his child? Limitation, weakness, and contact with death help me. For someone who believes they're chosen, who lives as if life's difficulties don't touch them, who thinks they can handle anything and does not accept limits, then contact with pain, illness, and death are necessary antidotes for healing. And so this is sort of the connection with the one here, this abnegation or denial of one's limits. The two and the one really share that. But they share it for somewhat different reasons or from different origins. Put simply, I guess, that two is too proud to be vulnerable. And that pride, in a simplified story, originates from a time that they were vulnerable and they needed protection and they didn't receive it. The one denies their needs because they transform their needs into shoulds, essentially. That the one is more oriented, being in the doing triad, toward action, toward making things right, toward fixing things. And so either their needs are reshaped and transformed into moral grounds, or they're ignored or suppressed because they're wrong in some way. So the one's denial of their needs, it comes to a need not to be wrong, a need not to be in the wrong. And then their simplified, wound or childhood experience that they want to not reiterate or repeat is a time that they saw in the family that they couldn't count on their parents to get it right. So those are really simplified stories that don't do justice to either type, but I'm just trying to help discern between the one and the two with respect to denial of need. In our meetings of Sexual Twos, we spent much time discussing this. All of us had transformative experiences related to illness and death. Quote, connecting with that dark part of myself was aided by the death of my son. It connected me to that pain. This death was a wound I did not allow myself to feel. Overlooking this pain was deeply unhealthy. My escape from pain and my flight forward caused much destruction in my life. My flight forward, you can hear the three energy there, focusing on moving forward, not getting caught up in difficulty. What has helped me most is becoming aware of my miseries, taking hits, being unemployed, feeling abandoned, almost ending up destitute, powerless. Unfortunately, it had to be this way for me to start listening and seeing the other, to begin being human, ordinary, to accept my mediocrity. Another testimony adds, this period has helped me greatly in accepting my limitations. I could never fully confront my limp. I always acted as if I'm not lame, I'm incredible. Internally, I struggled with my limp because it connects me with pain. Now, age has forced me to acknowledge the limits of my body, and so on. Another account of surgery, mortality, ordinariness, right? Humility, modesty. These are the virtues or the transformative keywords for the two. Susie Stroke told me, let yourself be cared for just because, and receive God's gift just because. If nothing strong forces us to connect with pain, there is no healing for twos. As I heard Claudio say many times, pain is what is truly healing. Seeing my limitations helps me. Some more testimonials here that I'll kind of skim through. I think it's instructive to read this chapter in combination with the social two. These types are not that different. Conquest and ambition. We covered the differences at the beginning, but I think what's helpful is this chapter is a little bit more focused on the transformation, whereas the social twos chapter is a little bit more focused on the passions and the fixations of the two. So here, one person took ayahuasca and had a vision of Archangel Michael and said to him, "Archangel, I'm just a normal person with my kids and my little job, and I'm fine." During the session, they took me to a bed, and I became aware that I'm 56 years old. I can't be here as if I were 20, which is how I normally act. Contact with illness. In contact with illness, pain, and death, we realize we are not special. We share mortality with all other human beings. When a sexual two surrenders to this experience, there's a sense of returning home, of encountering their true existence. Contact with true need and the acceptance of lack helps me. This trait and subtype must journey a long way to consider that needing is not bad, that lacking is human. This means recognizing the other's value without being diminished, being able to acknowledge that the other is better than me in many ways. It is healing to descend into the type 4, to finally stop pretending we lack nothing, to recognize that we do have deficiencies, to admit that feeling so feared, so labeled as negative, so avoided, to accept myself with my shadow, to come down from the pedestal and be one among sinners, to acknowledge that I'm not free from sin, to see myself in both sin and virtue. And so we talked previously about the relationship between the 2 and the 4, which of course being married to a 2 and being a 4, I know intimately, and I think it is one of the more powerful kind of shadow relationships. Of course, the 2 who's in the God realm, whose passion is pride, and the 4 who's in the hell realm, whose passion, or hungry ghost realm perhaps, whose passion is envy. So the 4 being dwelling in lack helps the 2 recognize their own lack. And it's a dual recognition, I think. They can recognize that they're not perfect, that they have flaws, that they are ordinary, etc. But they can also come into contact with their deepest lacks, that they weren't protected, that they are not safe being vulnerable, etc. But beware, the great problem of the sexual 2 may be believing they are healed beyond cured, and then again, it is necessary to begin unmasking a new image. So here's a problem that you'll see with the 2 and the 3 when we get to the 3. They're very quick to tell a victory story, like the hero's journey or sort of the arc is always very present for these types, and so they'll go on a journey, they'll have a difficulty, and then they're very quick to sort of tell the story of how they've moved through it, that they're healed. And so a 2, even in talking about their humility, may still be exhibiting so much pride, or there may be so much pride in one's own, let's say, criminal nature, having recognized their criminal nature and so on. So the 2s and 3s are always having to crack open again. Because transformation begins with understanding that absolute transformation never arrives, that one is never free from sin, we are not only angels but also demons. We never stop learning, making mistakes, suffering, and losing. All of this is part of life. There's no such thing as being immune to lack. And it is good to feel the need. Quote, the belief that I cannot need, the taboo surrounding that word, the fear of dependency, these stem from something beyond my childhood. Now I need to undo that mandate, to rediscover this experience, the primordial need that is legitimate, that is human, that connects me to others. This character has falsified this primordial need throughout their life, transforming it into false needs, whims, entitlements to do as they please, not to ask, but to take by perceived right, to demand, to take things for granted. Once again, the path involves frustrating these false needs to encounter the true need. One framework about the Enneagram describes the 2, the 5, and the 8 as rejecting types. The 2 has rejected their need and rejected the the need for protection. And so they provide their own protection. But opening up to this need, to this lack is key for the transformation piece. This is a very long chapter, but it's so good. I'm not in a rush here. Wanting to see myself, becoming conscious helps me. The most challenging part is recognizing how we seduce in countless ways, how we justify seduction, how we cast the net and refuse to let it go, driven by the insatiable desire to have everyone, to be liked, to be desired, to maintain that excitement in relationships, to feel attractive. Now we're kind of in the heart of the sexual twos energy. How can we untangle this seductive game so deeply ingrained in our skin, something we do so unconsciously? It helps when the person you love tells you they cannot trust you, that it's over. But it must be someone you genuinely love, someone who can disarm you with love and sincerity. That's when the mask begins to crumble, and slowly, layer by layer, the mechanism that was so deeply hidden, even from yourself, begins to emerge. It's like peeling back countless layers. It takes a lot of time, a lot of suffering, a lot of love, a lot of wanting to hold on to someone, and most importantly, a real willingness to open your eyes to that internal seductive, deceptive, manipulative motivation. You must want to see the lack of respect for the other, the selfishness and egocentrism. You must desire to see the shadow, to acknowledge that not everything in you is driven by good intentions. Beneath the unconsciousness lies an intention to capture, to hunt, to conquer. You can hear the 8 a little bit there, right? And so the 2 moves to 8. What are they? A wolf in sheep's clothing. It might be an interesting lens to apply there. What if the 2 is an 8 who seeks their satisfaction, right? That's a key word of the 8. Seeks their satisfaction and possessiveness of the sexual 8 through a more feminine angle, a more indirect angle, a more seductive angle, as opposed to the 8 who is more masculine. And the origin stories of the 2 types are not that different. The 8 also discovered that they couldn't be vulnerable, but the 8 then stepped into a prematurely adult role of not having needs. I will protect. I must protect. I must not be vulnerable. Something like that. I must not be controlled as well. I always think about the 8 as having this critical moment where someone wants to nurture them, wants to give them that love and support that they so deeply crave, and they have this split second choice of choosing that vulnerability, letting themselves be nurtured and vulnerable and weak, or pushing away. I don't want your love anymore, and they choose that path. Susie Stroke once told me, if you want to truly know yourself, if you put all your will and your senses into it, you will see the mechanism of your seduction and pride. And it's true. I can see it when I want to see it, and I can see its consequences in my life. But of course, that's painful. Detaching myself from emotion helps me. So the 2 is in the feeling triad, neighboring the doing triad. So there's a lot of feeling and then doing based on the feeling, and then they feel what they did, and they do some more, feel, do. So detaching from emotion helps me. And as Susan Stabile would say, like, bringing in thinking is really important for the two. Bringing in logic, analysis, neutral thinking is a great step for that type. What is destructive is a neurotic reaction to frustration. I don't get what I want, it hurts, but it's an egoic pain tied to pride, to not accepting the no. This can lead to very destructive behaviors toward ourselves, particularly concerning food, the body, and sexuality. We perceive the no as a withdrawal of love, and if the other does not love me, life no longer feels worth living. Inside, there's a sense of fury, of rage, which we quickly emotionalize into tears. It can seem even believable to ourselves, appearing as real pain, but it's a performance. It's ego. True pain has a different taste, a different depth. What is the healthy way out? Sometimes you begin to realize that this behavior isn't as genuine and doesn't yield the expected results with the other person. Then you may try to repress it. In my experience, repression is not the way either. The path, at least one possible way, is to breathe through what I feel, to meditate on it, and to observe it as if it weren't mine, to move through it, to be a little skeptical of myself, and not to take my emotions too seriously. It's something like letting go of emotional intensity, detaching from it. For the next testimony, what helps is this: training myself to be more skeptical of my emotions, to dissolve the emotional storm, and adopt a more austere attitude. Silence helps me, not talking helps me. Focusing on my actions help me. Actions speak louder than words. How to heal from false generosity. The crazy idea is that I must give to receive. I love Naranjo's crazy ideas. That must be one of his teachings, because you hear it throughout this book. I must give to receive. That's the crazy idea. That I have to satisfy all the other person's needs. That I cannot say no for fear of disappointing them. Deep down, there's the belief that by myself, without doing anything, I'm not worthy of love. But I believe the strongest driving force is the need for pride, to be exceptional for the other. Yeah, I mean, this is really a really dense paragraph. So let's just pause for a second. One of the challenges I think with the Enneagram is you'll hit these deep feelings, like the deep down feeling of the two is that they're not worthy of love. But then then it becomes an exercise of discernment, because that's what the Enneagram really is about. It's about discerning energies, discerning spirits, discerning motivations. And there are several types that will frequently feel they're not worthy of love. You could make the case that the 1 feels they're not worthy of love unless they're being perfect or right. The 2 we were just talking about. The 3 is not worthy of love unless they're succeeding or performing. The 4 is not worthy of love unless they're unique or special or authentic, etc. It is probably a feeling triad, especially a feeling triad kind of concern, this worthiness of love. We've talked about truth and feeling, and love, I think, is also core to that feeling triad. But what makes the two-ness emerge is not so much I have to give in order to be worthy of love, although that's great, that's deep. This is why I think the passions are so important. The driving force, that the battery of the two is not to get love exactly. It's the need for pride. It's the need to be exceptional to another, or to many in the case of the social two, or to one other in the case of the sexual two. The need to be exceptional. And this is why the 2 and the 4 have this, uneasy alliance, unholy alliance, as it were, because the 4, when we hear the need to be exceptional, you're going to automatically move more to the 4 there. So what do we mean when we talk about the 2's need for being exceptional? Well, they need to be the 2 fantasizes that people talk about them and say they're just, how did they do it? That's sometimes what I tease Terry with. How does she do it? How does she do it? What's her secret? Maybe it's Maybelline. It's that kind of exceptionalism. She must rise above mere mortals. And the primary way one does that is by not having needs. Because what is a god but a being who needs nothing from anybody else? But the paradox of a god, and Buddhist cosmology renders this so beautifully explicit. The paradox is that the god needs worship to sustain itself. So on the one hand, the god doesn't need anything. On the other hand, the god is extremely needy. And that interplay between needing nothing and needing worship is central to the pride of the two, which is the battery and the engine of the two. Contrast that with the four's need, the need to be envious. So the four has no sense of place except to be unconsciously comparing themselves with respect to another. And that other is rarely like a real person. It may be an ideal version of themselves, a previous version of themselves, the way quote unquote normal people seem to be. But the four's obsession with lack also places them in exceptional territory. But for the four, they may, for instance, think that they're exceptionally broken, that they're uniquely broken, or that they have an exceptional creative vision, or uniquely authentic. They have some DNA that needs to be expressed in the world. But the four, I think the four's wounding, I hesitate to say that it runs deeper than the two. That might be fourness coming out here, right? Like that's comparing, etc. But I think like the two is very intimate with abandonment. They had love from a protective caregiver. They know what that feeling is like. They feel God. They feel the warm, radiant sunshine of some being loving them. And then they feel the pain of that separation. The four, or maybe at least this four, there's a little bit more of like, the right to exist is a little bit in question. There's Enneagram Smith, the Eastern Body, Western Mind book. She locates the rights, various rights at various parts of the body. So the lowest root chakra, the right to exist, the right to be here. That seems to be a little bit at stake for the four in a way that it's not for the two. The right to want, the right to need, that's very much at stake for the two. So that's what I mean by deeper or earlier or more primordial, if you're trying to kind of sort that out. And you see it with twos. I mean, twos are, as Naranjo sort of says, more kind of openly, they're open, they're more sensual, they're more flowy, they move through the world with more ease. Now, that ease is, as we're seeing, a lot of performance, but it's also real. It's also real. I guess that's kind of an interesting paradox to explore more with twos, is somehow their ease in the world and their, I think Naranjo sort of said their eroticism is open, or their sensuality is open. Somehow that is both a genuine quality and a survival strategy. I think it's the same with their love. Like they do love. We have to be careful not to throw out the baby with the bathwater with this stuff. We're not saying all the loving of a two is just survival strategy, but it's like a happy coming together. And when we talk about the three, and this might come up with Naranjo, but I've heard Richard Rohr say this, threes are frequently very attractive people. So that's a great quality for a three, because a three is exactly the type of person who's going to use their looks to make forward progress. And think about presidents. Like, he looks presidential, right? Like, that might be a quality of a three. He looks the part. So what do you make of that? Like a three really is attractive, but then coinciding with that is also this use that they have for it. And I think there's something similar going on with twos and love. Twos really are loving. Twos really are open. They really are potentially sensual. And very early on, they use that. And in fact, probably they deep down maybe feel like they were forced to use that. And that further pokes at the deepest wounding of the two, which is that abandonment, and that they were used in some way, that maybe their loving was used and abused. And so then there's this pattern where they in turn become manipulators. Okay. In this giving, we don't see the other person's real needs. There's a sort of invasion, an excess of senseless generosity, because it doesn't come from what the other needs or asks for, but from what I want to give them, or what I believe is good for them, which often aligns with what is good for me. The path opens when, upon feeling frustrated by the other, I can resist the initial proud reaction of leaving an offense and instead manage to stay, to listen. Maybe the other person doesn't want or need what I want to give them. And it also helps to recognize that I haven't perceived or listened to their true needs, blinded by my excessive giving. How can one realize how can one realize that this excessive availability, this overabundance, this constant presence in the other's life is nothing more than a sin of omnipotence? Quote, during a deep meditation, I could see how much I insist on holding the world together, on helping everyone. When I suddenly realized it, I thought, who am I to hold the world together? The world is already held by God. All right. We are in the home stretch, so I'm just going to start breezing. Although now the author Consuelo Trujillo is getting into the sexuality piece, and I think it's important because it adds another dimension. So the sexual two wants to capture the other, to possess them, but this craving doesn't stop at sex. If we can go deeper, we see the seductive mechanism at play in the urge to help, in goodness, in good intentions, in sanctity. Seduction and pride create an image of someone unquestionable. And again, modesty, humility, ordinariness. These are all the notes there. A note from Alba Arenas on transformation, from her autobiographical work. For change to occur, I believe that the ego wounds most feared by the sexual two are precisely the ones that can become transformative resources as they help crack pride. In this sense, if arrogance yields, humiliation gives way to humility. From humiliation to humility. For this to happen, the individual must accept the opportunities that everyday life offers to take responsibility for simple tasks proposed by existence. Ability to delay gratification, a sense of justice toward oneself, completely distinct from self-indulgence. True freedom. Freedom is a very central concern for the two. How can someone who appears so free, there's a lot of free expression in the two, but how do you move from the appearance of freedom to true freedom? Someone who shows themselves to the world cloaked in false spontaneity, who justifies their actions as their right to be free, there can be no true freedom in dependency. There can be no freedom when the intent of my actions is to secure another's affection or to enchant them. There's only one way, to let go of the other in order to claim myself, even if it means losing the beloved. In this awareness, my will harmonizes with a greater will. In that freedom, there is healing, virtue, and guidance. This journey is a search. One never fully arrives, but it is a path of realization. And so finally, just notes on sexuality. The pursuit of power occurs through sex. The search for intensity is to feel alive. The belief is, I must give the other pleasure. I am in control. I search for and provide the orgasm, clinging to my way of doing it. Deep down, there's a lack of creativity hidden by an apparent disinhibition and boldness. There's a clinging to one way of doing things, a rigidity. You can hear the rigidity of the one here. Sexuality is experienced as a weapon of conquest and therefore is more genital, more masculine. The sexual two wants to achieve the orgasm, provoke it. There is a lack of faith in the energy that moves, in the experience of receiving the other, of letting go. As always, one begins to question this when experiencing frustration, dissatisfaction. So breaking through, approaching things another way, sensitivity, gentleness, tenderness. I heard Claudio tell a group of sexual twos, could it be helpful for you to practice the experience of sex without orgasm for a while, to see if it transforms into a delightful tenderness? Perhaps twos could benefit from the discipline often recommended by certain schools. This is the essence of the journey, to desexualize the loving experience, to give space to the heart, to the senses, to tenderness. Remember the social two, talking about the move from the reptilian brain to the mammalian brain. Something similar here, with the orgasm being kind of a reptilian result, a calculating kind of telos purpose of sex, versus the mammalian enjoyment body, enjoyment sensuality body that doesn't necessarily have a goal, is less calculative, is less means to an end. Testimonies from some people about Tantra, and I think by Tantra they mean more in like the sexual Tantra. Finally, indeed, revisiting one's experience of sexuality is a transformative journey for this subtype. It's not only that, it can become one of the openings that allows us to step into a deeper realization, an authentic and profound sense of love for others and for ourselves. It's an opportunity for surrender, a wave that propels us toward communion with divine energy, a doorway to transcendence. In summary, things that help, and I'll just read them. It's a list of bullet points. Experiencing situations that help dismantle the ego and uncover essential needs. Meditation, silence, reviewing the intention behind my actions and words. Being willing to question myself and be questioned. Staying present with comfort and pain, breathing through it. Listening to my limitations and allowing them to be my teacher. Consistency, perseverance, and commitment. Finding joy in the ordinary, the small, and being unnoticed. Faith that in this life I can free myself from the yoke of suffering. Asking for help. Solitude and reflection, and writing, like this writing or a diary. So that's the sexual two. Great teachings for all types here. And we will finish up with the self-preservation two next time. See ya.